Hey, this is the first episode of D-Series Garage. This is Nasty Canasta. That was my username on dseries.org, and I'm still going to use it. I'm going to dedicate this channel to like tech stuff, mostly obscure stuff. A lot of things that aren't talked about a whole lot. And I had a friend contact me recently who isn't super mechanically savvy, but kind of knows what's up. But he had posted about air coming out of his radiator, and he asked a forum whether it was his head gasket or not. And everybody on the forum told him that it was his head gasket, to the point where he was about ready to rip his head off. And what they should have been asking him is what he was working on recently. Had he done anything to the car? And I asked him if he swapped out his intake manifold or messed with anything in that area at all. Did you mess with your fast idle valve? And he said, wow, how'd you know? I tightened up my fast idle valve, so his idle was screwed up. So he tightened up his fast idle valve. So we are going to go over things, obscure things, that can mimic a blown head gasket, but is not a blown head gasket. A typical blown head gasket scenario is with the radiator cap off. Your coolant will continuously make bubbles as combustion is pushed into the cooling system. When you drive the car, your coolant overflow will fill up and possibly overflow out of that if you got this cap undone. And then when you go to check the radiator, there won't be anything in the radiator. It won't suck the coolant back in. So the radiator will be like half empty. So what can mimic a blown head gasket like that and push air into your cooling system? Your fast idle valve is connected underneath your throttle body like this. Coolant goes in, coolant goes out. Alright? Now when you take it off to tighten this up to fix your idle, you have these three O-rings. This O-ring, more than these two, tends to dry up and get brittle, or it will fall out when you take the fast idle valve off. It happens. It happened to me. If you don't notice that the O-rings are brittle or falling off and you put this back on, what the fast idle valve will do is continuously suck in air into the cooling system, which will create bubbles coming out of your radiator just like a blown head gasket. It'll do it forever, as long as the car's started. It will push air into the cooling system, and it will look exactly like a blown head gasket. So my first question to anybody would be, what have you worked on recently? Now, another thing that can mimic a blown head gasket or coolant in your combustion is your intake manifold gasket. This is a coolant passage here. This is the intake runner for cylinder 4. What will happen is, if you put it on jacked up, or if it just gets old and fails around here, intake manifold 4 will start to suck in coolant. And you will have coolant coming out of your exhaust, just like a blown head gasket. Exactly. Everybody will be telling you to change your head gasket, which is a lot of fucking work when it's just an intake manifold gasket or a stupid O-ring. So what else can mimic a blown head gasket? A shitty radiator cap that isn't doing its job will mimic a pressurized cooling system. And what will happen is, if the radiator cap isn't working correctly, these will pressurize to hell and sausage way up. And you will get online, you will tell people that my cooling system is all pressurized, what should I do? And a bunch of people are going to tell you it's the head gasket. And it isn't. So, those are 3 things to look into before you go tearing your goddamn head off and going through all the trouble of doing that just to find out it's something really simple like an O-ring. Could you imagine if that dude had tore his head off, put it all back together, milled his head or whatever the hell he was going to do, and then put it back together, started it, and air bubbles were still coming out of the radiator? That's like a suicide moment. Seriously. So, those are things to look at. There's even more, but I'm sticking to the obscure stuff with this channel. This is Nasty Canasta, and this is D-Series Garage.